Alright everybody, we're the group behind Mage tonight. I'm Alex Coleman.
I'm Carson.
Chris James.
Joseph.
Eugene.
So really quick, just an overview of our presentation. We're going to talk about our original game concept and the technologies we use to fulfill that concept. We'll talk about our current implementation and the game development goals that went into that. Then we'll talk about our individual tasks and challenges, some of the AI topics that we used, and finally we'll move on to the live demo.
So for the original game concept, what we were trying to do with this game was to try to make a RPG, like top-down, or it's an isometric view, where you can play as either a mage or a knight, or something that's in between. So it's kind of up to the player to pick as to what they want to play. It'll have include some platforming and have various enemies that will be interesting to fight, and it's inspired by the games such as YS, Castle Crashers, and Shrine. As for what we actually implemented, we tried to stick pretty close to what the original concept was, and for the most part it does take on most of these properties. The technologies that we used Unity and C# for scripting in Unity. The version control for it, we used GitHub to keep our code, together and shared. And we used Pivotal Tracker as a project management application, which just allowed us to keep track of where we are in our project.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have currently done, and then just a little bit about some things that we had planned to do that we haven't done yet, but we should be able to get most of them done by game day. So what we kind of had planned was for a class like this. Obviously, we're not going to get a full fledged out game with multiple levels and all that kind of stuff. So the idea was to get a single playable level. So you'll have a level with some enemies and a boss at the end of the level. So currently we have a map, and that map has some enemies on it. It's not fully populated with enemies yet, but again, that's something that we'll get to for game day. And we have some of the boss fight, some of an enemy boss fight down. So as far as what we can do with the player, you have basic player movement, jumping, that sort of thing. The player can do different attacks. He has both. So as far as the concept of the Mage Knight goes, what we decided to do was implement a single character that was both a mage and a knight. So you can do either attacks, like magic attacks, spells, or you can have melee attacks with a sword. And currently we have most of the functionality for the player implemented. As far as the attacking goes, there's still a few small bugs, and it's currently not, like right now the player is just able to do all the attacks, and you can switch between the melee attacks and the mage attacks, and he's currently just able to do all of them, but we had sort of envisioned a skill tree type thing. And then as far as the enemies go, we have the enemies with pathfinding that follow the player around, and then a boss that has sort of a battle area, and so when you enter his trigger area, he starts attacking you. So then again, I talked about this a little bit, but some of the game development goals that we wanted to do and that we have done some of. As far as AI goes, a lot of the AI in Mage Knight has to do with the enemies, the way they attack, the way they find the player, that sort of thing. There's a lot of trigger systems and state machines as far as how different things go, but we'll talk a little bit more about AI later. The combat, we wanted this game to be sort of like a dungeon crawler, in that with the dungeon crawler you're a little bit overpowered and there's a lot of enemies and you can fight a lot of them off at once. And so we thought that would be a little more fun and exciting because you're constantly fighting a lot of enemies. We wanted a little bit of puzzle solving, which we haven't really done any of yet. And then the platforming elements are fun, and YS was actually a good example of a game that has platforming elements in a dungeon crawler type game. And that we have a little bit of, that the player can jump, and there's some platforms in the map. It's kind of neat, you'll get to see a lot of it. And another thing the main thing that we haven't gotten to yet, well actually two main things that we haven't gotten to yet that we wanted to was the skill development / progression and the storyline. We were busy implementing a game, so we didn't really have time to make a story. And then as far as the skill development goes, we decided to make all the skills up front, and then once we have all the skills, then we can implement some sort of skill or progression tree. So we still have plans to do that to an extent. I'm not really planning on making 20 different skills that can, work throughout an entire game series, but that's sort of the idea of how it would work.
Alright, so as far as tasks are distributed, what we all are doing is actually acquiring assets for our game, including individual models for our player and enemy, every single weapon and all the icons we need for our menus. In addition to that, we're also making our own scripts for certain characters and enemies and menus, as well as the overall design of the game. But as far as individual tasks are concerned, Alex here made the entire boss fight. He made the entire boss monster, really cool monster by the way, and also made the main menu. Carson did the entire level design for basically the entire level that we're going to implement for our game. It's really long and it also has a lot of cool effects. Chris implemented the enemy controller, including all the animations for each enemy you face and all of its attributes. And Joseph, what he did was implement a player controller, including the animations for attacking and casting spells. And what I did was implement a health UI system and a skill menu. So, over the course of this game, we've had a lot of challenges. First off, some of us were actually not familiar with Unity, so learning C# scripting was one of the first hurdles that we had to overcome. But overall, it was not too hard to learn. But a bigger challenge was working with the assets, especially with the animations and the models. Making models for these characters and enemies, it's pretty tough. So either you get lucky and find one online or just buy it. But also we did have some, as Joe mentioned, we did have some bugs with the animations, but they're all fixed pretty much. And then an even bigger challenge would be setting up the 3D environment, especially when it came to choosing the right shaders that would take into account all the lighting effects that we wanted and preventing the correct shadows, because we had a lot of problems with getting the shadows to come out properly. And finally, our biggest challenge, mine personally, was using Git. I don't know about any of you, but I personally find Git to be really difficult to manage. If one thing goes wrong, you can mess up the entire project. Luckily that hasn't happened, but just a fair warning.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the AI systems that we plan to make use of and that we did, in fact, actually end up implementing for the game. The pathfinding for our enemies makes use of the Unity's nav mesh system. We had to tweak it a little bit to get certain things working, like jumping for the enemies, and also range finding, so that the enemies would stop following and follow the player at set intervals, which is at least partially working right now. The command hierarchy, the second bullet point, is something that isn't implemented yet, but it is a feature that I did want to get into the game. We want to have some units that are differentiated from the, lowest level units that are able to both spawn and kind of direct the enemy units around the map towards the player, while him himself, the spawning unit, would be evading the player for the most part, trying to keep his distance. The finite state machines are made use of all over the place. with our enemies, the state machines control the enemy's behavior from being idle to attacking to dying. And those are extensively tied in through the animations that we have for our different types of units, including the player, has finite state machines governing his animations and behavior. The filtered randomness, we've got at least some implemented, well, let's see here. We've got plans to make use of filtered randomness in the sense of getting the enemy units to, for one thing at least, the damage being dealt by the enemy units are going to fall within certain ranges that would be filtered out, as well as the paths that the enemies would be following during the course of the game. They would be able to plot different sections of the map to travel to and from in a filtered way. So they wouldn't just be wandering around aimlessly. They would have like different tracks that they would be selecting to have a to and from kind of a path that they'd be following. We make use of scripting all throughout. I mean, you could say that the C# scripting language of Unity is itself all scripting, and that's how all the game logic is handled. So it's included here because that's from the class's topic. You know, scripting does handle the things that don't fall into any other AI category. And we also make use of trigger systems throughout for handling the combat of the player units with the monsters, as well as for triggering events. The event triggering isn't in there yet, other than for handling the, I guess, radius for monster attacking and for registering the monsters and players' attacks themselves. And with that, we have a demo of our game actually working.
So the first thing you're going to see, one thing that we mentioned was that, well, okay, first of all, we set it up to be used with a game controller. We just, I don't know, I guess we just thought that it would be a good game to play with a controller instead of keyboard and mouse. Also, immediately once I hit play, you'll start seeing all the enemies follow the player. That's because we don't yet have implemented a sort of like player in range type area for them to start attacking. So, the player can run around, jump, that kind of thing. Enemies follow the player. You can see that the player has a sword and a staff. He has both melee attacks and mage attacks. The melee attacks are pretty basic right now. The mage attacks are a little bit cooler. You can shoot fireballs and ice balls and do some other things. Right now the enemies are technically dead. We haven't fully, there's no death animation yet, and also there's a bug where if you walk to them, they'll still attack you. But there's no player health yet, so you can't die. Here's some more enemies that came from another room. Yeah. There's also, like, obviously you can see some bugs here with the, like, where some of the map is cut off and stuff. And then up here, there's platforms. And over here, you can see in the corner there is the boss.
Yeah, one of our, like, it's not a priority, but getting a camera script that can recognize when there are walls in the way between the player and the camera, and like making the walls transparent is like a a thing that needs to happen.
So there's, as you can see, there's some bugs with like when the boss attacks the player, sometimes he like shoots up or whatever. But it's a work in progress. But like we've obviously also done a lot. So, but we still have a lot to do. We still have a whole week until game day. So we're gonna work on getting a lot of the bugs fleshed out, as well as getting being able to like complete the level and stuff. So that's pretty much it, I think. Anybody else have anything?
Any questions about the game or? meeting design goals.
I'll ask the same question I asked the last group about if you could talk about your design process, maybe any playtesting you did, or at least just how did you come up with these concepts and what led you in this direction?
As for the design process, we sat down for like the first week or so and thought up of like what we wanted to accomplish and what we like just like goals in general that we wanted to reach and how we wanted to reach them.
How did you decide on the firewall? You know, like what are these? How did you make up these designs?
So, to be honest, we decided on a firewall because there was a free firewall asset.
Yeah, we were tied down by the assets available in the Unity asset store. So basically, if you could find a free asset for something, we put it in the game.
Yeah, I want to say that when we started, like, it seemed like it wasn't going to be, like, the difference between having a 2D versus a 3D type of a game was, it was going to be a lot, but it wasn't going to be, like, if we had picked to do 2D, that it wouldn't have been much less difficult, but it turns out that the assets themselves were a big hurdle, because, I mean, even though I, like, know how to model things, like, getting a 3D model to Unity with animations and textures and lighting pipeline working could have taken like the whole semester to like by itself. So we were kind of constrained with what we could get on the asset store. And a lot of the things on the asset store that are high quality, that have their animations in properly, are actually really expensive. Like there's some models on there that are like $300, which I didn't want to buy.
It's really cool dragon.
Yeah. So we basically we spent a lot of time looking for assets that were both what we wanted, like the Mage Knight guy there himself. It took us a while to settle on one that had both the look we wanted and that had the animation that supported the model, that did the things that we wanted to do. And that honestly was a pretty big hurdle to get around. The assets themselves. So, I mean, I think, other than that, the whole 3D-ness was also a very big challenge. Handling three-dimensional vectors, handling the pathfinding and all that.
Any other questions for the group?
Yeah. Carson, you laid out all this level, right?
Yeah.
So did you have to go in manually and place everything? That's how you do this?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. It's worth it though, right?
Yeah, it looks great.
It's not completely done yet. It still has a little bit more work to do.
Is there a top to this town?
Yeah,
Kind
there's
of.
a little platform at the top.
Yeah, I was
This
trying
is
to-
where the final boss will actually be.
Oh.
Oh my god.
Keep going, keep going.
Yeah, I was going there and then I started paying attention and fell off. So
I really like the jump animation on the game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the legs flailing.
really good though.
Yeah, this asset, the night asset, was like our best find probably.
And before when I was up here, it was a closed off room, but
Yeah,
now it's not.
it's
so
not-
I'm not sure about that.
It's not the updated. We're like a second.
Oh, that's why. Oh, because I pulled it from.
Is there fall damage?
Not yet.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of what we're trying to get, like,
Yeah.
the last time we met,
Yeah.
for our milestone, like, to get a minimum viable thing, to get, like, the essential things implemented first, because, like, a lot of the map is kind of open, that we want to have, like, props and, like, unessential elements in that aren't essential for the gameplay itself, but will make it feel more like this is a populated dungeon. Yeah, that's all basically safe at the end, and we're
You say you don't have player health, but is like the attacking set up at all like the
It
system?
registers when attacks are made. So if we were to open up the console, it would say that player attacked enemy or something.
The player doesn't. The enemies have health right now, but the players don't. And I mean, like you saw that they die. They don't actually die yet, but they recognize when they're supposed to be dead. The player has health, but the enemies don't actually deal damage to the player yet. But that's something that's like it's set up so that the enemies have an attack. It's just not. We didn't have time to get it set up together to where when you know, as you see, they're attacking the player. Just when it actually attacks them, to actually recognize that, you know, they were attacked and damage should be dealt.
That's close.
Yeah, it's.
They should be dying right now, but they're just sitting there.
Any other questions?
Are you gonna have multiple types of enemies, or?
Yeah, like the thing, the next enemy that's being implemented, like I said, is the commander of these little gnolls. It's going to be an enemy type that's kind of like a wandering tower. So like in a tower defense game, the tower like spawns the enemies. I'm going to have a skeleton mage. We're going to have a skeleton mage that can actually spawn these guys. His behavior will be to evade the player as much as he can, and that the player would actually need to hunt him down specifically to stop the other monsters from spawning. And aside from that one, like having different monster types that have sort of the same behavior and ranged attacks to differentiate, you know, even like more monster types. But basically using the monster controller script that's controlling all these, we've been trying to flesh it out as a template to use for lots of different monster types, because it can be reused like that rather easily once it's fleshed out. So we were just trying to get a fully fleshed out monster controller that can handle all the things it needs to handle first before we had more and more types of units.
Yeah, once you get like one monster done and working, it's pretty easy to essentially just change out the model and the animations, and then you have another working monster that can use all the same components as the previous one.